I used to think buying our first house with Ryan meant freedom finally. A space that was ours. No upstairs neighbors stomping at midnight. No cramped desk shoved into a bedroom corner. No borrowed kitchen smells sneaking under the door. Just sunlight pouring onto the breakfast table and quiet walls that belonged to me. But peace didn't last. The very first Sunday, his parents rang the bell with a frozen pie and the line, "Oh, we were just in the area." I laughed, thinking it was cute. By the third Sunday, they didn't bother ringing at all. They walked in, dropped their coats, and treated the living room like their personal lounge. Ryan only shrugged. "It's temporary," he said. Temporary became routine. Routine became invasion. And one quiet evening, I realized, either I take back my home, or I'll lose myself inside it. The first couple of visits almost felt harmless. Sandra would arrive balancing a grocery bag in her arms, a loaf of bread, sometimes a box of cookies, as if that token gesture bought her a seat at our dinner table. Glenn would shuffle in behind her, already reaching for the remote before he even greeted me. I'd set the table, smile tightly, and convince myself it was all temporary. Everyone wants to bond in the beginning, I thought. Give them time, they'll fade out. But time didn't fade them out. It multiplied them. By the fifth Sunday, I realized I was grocery shopping with them in mind. Extra chicken breasts, larger bags of potatoes, double the detergent for all the towels they cycled through. I never agreed to become a live-in hostess, yet somehow I was planning my life around their drop-ins. Sandra always had opinions. My curtains were too dark, my seasoning was too light, my detergent too floral. She perched on a kitchen stool like a self-appointed judge while I cooked, her voice steady with that syrupy sweetness that carried more sting than kindness. "You don't use garlic powder?" she asked once, blinking at me as if I'd confessed to not washing my hands. I wanted to snap back. "I use real garlic, Sandra. The kind that grows from the ground," but instead I laughed politely and stirred the pot. My laugh sounded brittle even to me. Glenn, meanwhile, treated our living room like his personal sports bar. He cranked the TV volume to stadium levels, leaned back in my favorite chair, and shouted at players who couldn't hear him. When I asked if he might turn it down just a notch, he grunted, "This is how I enjoy it." And that was that. Ryan? He just smiled, kissed his mom's cheek, and told her she looked wonderful. Every time I glanced at him for backup, all I got was a shrug. "They mean well, Maya. Don't overthink it." Overthink it. That was the phrase that hooked around my ribs like a barb. Was I really overthinking? Or was I the only one awake to the fact that our sanctuary, the house I thought would save me from chaos, was being swallowed whole by people who never even asked permission to step inside? One Sunday night, after they finally left, I stood in the kitchen surrounded by dirty dishes, my arms aching, my nerves pulled taut. Ryan scrolled on his phone, oblivious. I whispered, "Maybe next weekend, it could just be us?" He looked up, genuinely confused. "What do you mean? They're family." Ow, family. To him, that word was a blanket excuse. To me, it was becoming a prison sentence. By the time spring rolled around, it wasn't visiting anymore, it was ritual. Every Saturday night, I felt a creeping dread, knowing what Sunday would bring. The crunch of tires in the driveway had become my alarm clock. Glenn's booming laugh, Sandra's pointed remarks, the clatter of their shoes on hardwood, all of it meant my weekend wasn't mine. They didn't knock now. They let themselves in like they owned a set of keys. Sandra would call out, "Maya, we're here!" as if I'd invited her. Glenn went straight for the recliner, remote in hand, already flipping to sports before his coat was off. Our home, my sanctuary, turned into their second address. The guest room I once imagined as a yoga space was now their nap station. Sandra explained it with faux innocence. "Your couch hurts Glenn's back, dear. The bed is better for his posture." I smiled tightly, but inside, something snapped. That was my space, my vision. I'd hung eucalyptus in the corners, lit candles there. Now it smelled like menthol cream and aftershave. Meals weren't for Ryan and me anymore. They were performances. Sandra positioned herself in the kitchen, critiquing my chopping. Glenn announced what side dishes he preferred, like I was a caterer. Ryan just kept eating, nodding, occasionally cracking a joke to ease the tension. I tried small rebellions, serving simple pasta instead of full roasts, pretending to forget dessert. But Sandra always compensated, pulling a frozen pie from her bag, sliding it into my oven, announcing, "Don't worry, Maya, I've got us covered." Oh, covered. That word burned. What gnawed at me most wasn't just their presence, it was Ryan's blindness. Each Sunday, when I asked if we could maybe have a quiet weekend, his answer never changed. "It's temporary." He said it so easily, like tossing a penny into a fountain. Temporary, but weeks had turned into months, and I started to notice how my behavior shifted. I walked softer in my own halls, worried Sandra would critique my footsteps next. I rationed my words, afraid anything I said would be twisted into proof of my ungraciousness. My house felt less like home, more like a stage where I played the part of a dutiful hostess in a script I never agreed to. One night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning above me. The guest room was occupied. Again, the TV downstairs still hummed faintly. Ryan snored lightly, blissfully unaware. And in that stillness, I realized I wasn't living in a marriage. I was living in a boarding house run by Sandra and Glenn, and Ryan was just another tenant. One evening, after another endless Sunday, I set my fork down and asked as gently as I could, "Ryan, do you think maybe next weekend could just be ours? No guests, no pie, just us." He looked up from his plate like I'd suggested canceling Christmas. "What do you mean?" "They're family." "I know," I said carefully. "But every week? It's a lot." He shrugged, chewing. "They mean well, Maya. You're overthinking it." There it was again, overthinking. That word that made me feel small, irrational, like I was the one ruining the peace. The following week, I tried another approach. We were in the kitchen, chopping vegetables side by side. The moment felt lighter, safer. I slid in casually. "Hey, I was thinking maybe my parents could come stay for a night next month. They haven't seen the house yet." Ryan froze. Not long, just half a second, but I saw it. His jaw tightened, his knife slowed. "Your parents? Overnight?" "Just one night," I said quickly. "We could cook together, show them the place. It would be low-key." He grimaced. "Maya, no offense, but your dad makes me feel like I'm at a job interview. And your mom, she's nice, but I don't know. I'd have to be on. It's exhausting." I set my knife down harder than I meant to. "On? You mean polite?" "Don't twist it," he sighed. "I just can't relax around them. They're not as easygoing as my parents." I stared at him, stunned. "Do you realize what you just said? I've been cooking, cleaning, and entertaining your parents every week without complaint? But the thought of one night with mine makes you anxious?" Ryan stirred the pan as if nothing was wrong. "It's different. Different." That word slammed into me like a fist. Different meant his comfort mattered more than mine. Different meant my effort was invisible. I tried again, my voice low. "Ryan, I'm exhausted. I'm hosting, cleaning, smiling when I want to scream. Can't you see that?" He didn't answer. He just flipped the peppers in the pan and changed the subject. That night, I lay awake, my mind replaying the conversation like a broken record. The ceiling fan spun lazily above me, mocking my restlessness. Every argument I swallowed, every complaint I buried, pressed heavier against my chest. In the darkness, I realized something terrifying. Ryan wasn't blind. He was choosing not to see. It wasn't that he didn't notice my exhaustion. It was that my exhaustion didn't matter. And that thought, more than Sandra's critiques or Glenn's noise, was what kept me staring at the ceiling until morning. It was a Tuesday when I came home from running errands and froze in the doorway. 2 large rolling suitcases sat by the front door, scuffed and heavy, like they had been dropped there in a rush. Before I could process it, Sandra appeared in the hallway, her voice bright as bells. "Hope you don't mind, Maya. We thought we'd stay a few nights. Glenn's back is acting up again, and it's just easier not to drive back and forth." I still had my keys in my hand. "A few nights? Just until Wednesday," she said cheerfully. "Ryan said it was totally fine." Of course he did. When I found Ryan in the kitchen, he was stirring a pot of pasta like nothing had changed. "It's just a couple of days," he said without looking at me. You know how they are. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. The phrase pulsed in my head like a migraine. Upstairs, the guest room was already claimed. The bed unmade, Sandra's silk robe draped over the chair, Glenn's slippers lined neatly by the door. My eucalyptus bundles were shoved aside, my candles hidden under a pile of their toiletries. The room that once smelled of lavender now reeked of menthol cream. At dinner that night, Sandra leaned back in her chair and said, "Maya, would you mind switching the laundry detergent? The lavender you use makes Glenn's skin itch." Glenn chimed in. "And the water pressure upstairs is a bit rough. Maybe you could look into that?" I forced a smile so thin it hurt my cheeks. "Sure, I'll add it to my list." Across the table, Ryan twirled spaghetti on his fork, oblivious. That night, lying in bed, their footsteps echoed down the hallway. The walls of my sanctuary pressed in on me. My body ached from holding in every reaction I wasn't allowed to have. Ryan's snores rattled beside me while I stared at the ceiling fan, feeling my patience peel away layer by layer. Two choices circled in my head. Keep playing the good wife, the flexible hostess, the doormat in designer sweatpants, or quietly remove myself, leave the house to the people who clearly loved it more than its owners. At 2 a.m, I turned over and reached for my phone. One message, just one. "Vanessa, do you still have that guest room?" Her reply was instant. "Always." I put the phone back on the nightstand, my chest pounding. I didn't know the plan yet, but something had shifted. I wasn't furious. Not yet. But I was done waiting for Ryan to notice. And the cruelest part? He didn't notice a thing. By Friday, the house no longer felt like mine. It felt like a boarding lodge run by Sandra and Glenn, with Ryan and me demoted to background staff. Sandra had officially reorganized my pantry. "You'll thank me later, Maya," she said sweetly, lining up jars in alphabetical order. Glenn installed himself permanently in the recliner, a fortress of chip bags and sports magazines around him. Every time I passed through the living room, I had to bite my tongue not to scream. The guest room was lost. My office space was gone. Even my bathroom shelf now held Sandra's serums and Glenn's denture cleaner. Their lives spilled over every corner of mine until I couldn't breathe. That night, I tried again with Ryan. "They've been here 5 days," I whispered, as we brushed our teeth. "It's temporary," he said through a mouthful of foam. The words slammed into me like a door shutting in my face. Temporary had stretched into permanence. By Saturday, I was cracking. Sandra commented on my towel folding. Glenn complained about the Wi-Fi speed. And when Sandra suggested I add boundaries to my work schedule, "You shouldn't work so late, dear. It's not healthy." I almost laughed in her face. Boundaries? From the woman who had stolen my house? I excused myself and slipped outside, dialing Vanessa. The moment she answered, I didn't even say hello. "I'm 5 seconds away from torching a throw pillow," she snorted. "Then come stay here." "It's not that simple," I muttered, staring at the glowing windows of my house that no longer felt like mine. "Then make it complicated," she said, her voice softer now. "Strategic. You know that's your thing." I blinked. "Strategic how?" She started laying out a plan. It was absurd and brilliant at the same time. Slip away quietly, no drama. Leave Ryan to his parents, let them live in the house they acted like they owned. And watch from a safe distance as the reality of their comfort finally dawned on him. At first, I resisted. It felt too theatrical, too drastic. But as I listened to the thump of Glenn's footsteps echoing down my hall, Sandra's voice carrying through the kitchen, Ryan's silence, I realized absurdity was the only language left. That night, I began preparing. Not with suitcases that would spark questions. Just a small bag tucked in the back of the closet. Essentials only. Enough to slip away without fuss. And for the first time in weeks, I felt my lungs expand. Not fully, not yet, but enough to remind me that freedom was possible. The next morning, I made Ryan's coffee the way he liked it. Extra hot, splash of oat milk. I set it on the counter and watched him pick it up without noticing I hadn't poured one for myself. Sandra drifted in wearing my robe and asked if I had any chamomile tea that wasn't too flowery. Glenn shuffled in behind her, yawning, reaching for the remote. They were perfectly at home. And that was exactly the problem. On Monday evening, while Sandra fussed with the laundry and Glenn watched TV at full blast, I pulled Ryan aside. My aunt in Portland slipped and broke her wrist. I said carefully, rehearsed. She doesn't have anyone nearby. I should go help for a few days. Ryan barely looked up from his phone. Are you driving or flying? Driving, I replied quickly. It's faster. He nodded, already scrolling again. Drive safe. Sandra popped her head into the kitchen, smiling. Will you be prepping some meals before you leave, Maya? We don't want to mess up your kitchen system. Glenn chuckled like it was a joke. My hands tightened around the counter, but I only smiled. Of course. That night, I packed a single small bag. No suitcases, no dramatics. On my nightstand, I left a plain white envelope. Inside, a single note. I'll be gone for a while. If you need space, now you have it. Maya. By the time the sun rose, I was already pulling into Vanessa's driveway. She greeted me at the door with a bottle of wine and a look that said everything. Finally. Her apartment was small but warm, free of commentary and criticism. I lit a candle, opened my laptop, and for the first time in weeks, exhaled without fear someone would judge the sound. Ryan called the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I texted, missed the last train home. I'll stay another day. Then another. And another. On the 5th day, while I was making dinner at Vanessa's, my phone buzzed again, this time not from Ryan, but from the moving company I'd quietly arranged through Vanessa's connections. By sunset, a white moving truck pulled up to the driveway of my house. Sandra spotted it first from the living room window. Oh, they must be delivering something for Maya, she chirped, straightening her robe. 2 movers stepped out, carrying clipboards. Delivery for Langford residence, one said. Glenn walked out to the porch, puffing his chest. That's us, the mover nodded, pointing at the manifest. Full relocation order, furniture, dressers, cookware, new residence listed at 912 Silver Hill Lane. Sandra's smile faltered. I'm sorry, what? This must be some kind of mistake. But the movers were already unloading. A full-size mattress, boxes labeled Langford, master bedroom, even a recliner chair. They carried the pieces straight into the guest room, arranging them neatly as if the house had always belonged to Sandra and Glenn. By the time Ryan came home from work, the closets were filled with his parents' clothing, the dresser drawers labeled, and a sticker had been added to the mailbox. Langford, parents. He dropped his keys, his eyes wide. What the hell is going on? Sandra clasped her hands together, beaming. Isn't it wonderful? Maya said we could have this space while she's away, and since you're on your own, we figured it just makes sense. Glenn, show him the new recliner. Ryan's gaze darted upstairs, then to the envelope still sitting on the nightstand. He tore it open again, as if the words might have changed. They hadn't. When his call came through that night, I silenced it. A text followed. Maya, come on, we need to talk. 3 hours later, I replied. Can't talk. You're busy hosting. Hope it's going well. At Vanessa's, I poured us each a glass of wine. For the first time, I felt the balance of power shift. The house was theirs now, exactly as they always wanted. And Ryan? He was finally getting a taste of what I'd lived through for months. The first week without me, Ryan played the role of the confident son and capable husband. He texted me photos of a half-cooked lasagna with the caption, Chef Ryan in action. Another day, it was a snapshot of the living room, Sandra smiling on the recliner, Glenn cheering at the TV. See? We've got it under control, he wrote. I didn't reply. By the second week, the tone changed. The messages came faster, rougher around the edges. Maya, where do we keep the vacuum bags? The washer smells weird. Is that normal? Your mom's roast chicken recipe? Where is it? I scrolled through them in silence, sipping coffee at Vanessa's kitchen table. Vanessa peeked over my shoulder and smirked. It's amazing how fast. It's not a big deal turns into, help me, I'm drowning. And she wasn't wrong. Meanwhile, Sandra had started calling me directly. One afternoon, her voice came soft through the phone. Sweetheart, are you planning to come back anytime soon? Why? I asked. You've got the whole house. Well, Glenn and we thought this was temporary. So did I. She went quiet after that. But Ryan didn't stop. His texts grew more desperate. I didn't realize how much you were juggling. I'm sorry. Then, just hours later. Still, they're my parents. I can't kick them out. That line told me everything. My exhaustion had always been secondary to their comfort. Even now, with his life unraveling, he was clinging to their needs over mine. Back at the house, things were falling apart. Glenn left takeout containers piled in the sink. Sandra claimed she didn't want to touch Maya's laundry, so clothes stacked high in baskets. The dishwasher broke, and no one fixed it. Ryan stopped cooking, then stopped eating at home altogether. A mutual friend sent me a photo from social media. Ryan at a diner, hunched over a plate of fries, his parents sitting grimly beside him. The caption read, "Family night out." But the look on Ryan's face wasn't joy, it was exhaustion. Every day that passed, I felt lighter, freer. It wasn't revenge I craved, it was balance. And now, for once, I had it. When Ryan finally called me, his voice was raw. "Maya, please. I can't do this. I didn't realize how much you carried." I let the silence stretch before answering. "That's the problem, Ryan. You never realized." He begged. He bargained. But all I heard was the echo of Sandra's footsteps in my hall, Glenn's laughter rattling my walls, and Ryan's shrug every time I asked for help. I hung up gently. Not out of anger, but clarity. Ryan wasn't my partner anymore. He was just another tenant in a house that no longer belonged to me. The envelope I sent next wasn't a note. It was a digital separation agreement, drafted with the help of a lawyer friend of Vanessa's. Not divorce. Not yet, but a clean line drawn in ink. When Ryan called, panicked, his voice cracked. "Maya, what is this? You're really doing this over a couple of weekends?" I closed my eyes. Steady. "It was never just weekends, Ryan. And you know it." Silence. Then a whisper. "I can't afford the house on my own. That's not my burden anymore." 2 weeks later, a notification popped up on my phone. The house was listed online. I clicked the photos, clutter everywhere. Sticky notes on drawers labeled "Do Not Touch," Glenn's foot massager in the living room. My once perfect home looked like a cheap rental. I didn't buy it back. I didn't need to. I'd already signed a lease on a small townhouse with a balcony and a deep tub. Nothing extravagant, just mine. One morning, a mutual friend spotted me at a cafe. She blinked, said I looked lighter, glowier. "How's Ryan?" I asked. She shrugged. "Living with his parents. It's a lot." I smiled faintly. It always was. That night, Vanessa and I toasted to peace. She leaned over the table. "Any regrets?" I thought for a moment. "Only that I didn't leave sooner." Sometimes peace doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like absence. It sounds like silence. And it feels like waking up alone in your own home. Breathing. Really breathing. For the first time in years.